great to be back. Great to be back with Heritage. Great to be back with Jeff Sessions, Senator Sessions, someone I admire a great deal. We fought the drug war together, and we won some, didn't we, Jeff? We sure did. U.S. Attorney Sessions and I, when I was the drug czar. Ridiculous title, but good job. As drug czar, I referred to my wife as Zarling, and our then two little boys as the Zardines. Keep eating. If you were talking, I would eat. And Steve, we look for your insight about Chicago. I've been playing all week that great line from Sean Connery from The Untouchables, the Chicago way. You bring a knife, we bring a gun. You send our guys to the hospital, we send your guys to the morgue. That's what I'm afraid of. We'll see. I guess we'll find out. We'll find out about that. Ed, it's always a pleasure to be with you and Linda. Thank you very much. We're pleased with the success of the radio show. It's not Sean Hannity, it's not Rush Limbaugh, it's not Laura Ingraham, but we're getting there. We're number 6 or 7. We got 3.25 million people who get up at 6:10 in the morning, and thank you. We have a somewhat different theory. As I kid my friends and colleagues, Sean and Rush and Laura, we listen to our callers, which is just kind of a novel thing. But it's because early in the morning you sometimes don't have a lot to say. And you left out the other thing I do, which is I work for CNN. Now you were trying to save me a boo line or a hiss line. Any conservative can work for Fox, kids. I'll tell you. You want to go into enemy territory, parachuted behind the enemy lines. That's where I am. Anyway, and I'm glad to be there. All right, you will find if you open a copy of the American Patriots Almanac that other things happened on this day. This is where Stanley and Livingston finally met, and more significantly, this is when Newt Rockne said win one for the Gipper, and other things. That's all in the American Patriots Almanac, the latest book that we've done. Let me make some remarks. Some of this is harsh because it's truthful, and then the other parts, which are also truthful, try to give you some lift. But in the Socratic tradition, I have a PhD in philosophy, don't know why, but that's a philosopher's statement. Socrates said, candor, intelligence, and goodwill, I will give you my candid assessment of things as intelligently as I can do it since I've been up since 3:45, and I promise you goodwill, and we'll have some time for questions. Anyway, it is, as always, a pleasure to be here. Last Tuesday, Republicans were trounced. There's no getting around that simple fact. Jeff Sessions wasn't, and that's a very, very good thing. And I salute Alabama, I salute Oklahoma, I salute Wyoming, red states that stayed red. And Alec Baldwin said he was going to move to Europe if Bush were elected. I promised I was going to Texas. And I may still. Remember Davy Crockett said, the hell with this, I'm moving to Texas. I sort of had the same feeling. Jeff, one thing, I went to a wedding. Sorry, I'm digressing. Mrs. Frankfurter used to say of Justice Frankfurter, Felix makes 2 mistakes when he speaks. First, he digresses from his text. Second, he returns to it. Went to a wedding of an Alabama groom and a North Carolina bride on Saturday night in Charlotte. And I met the father of the bride, and he said, it's such an honor to meet you. I said, why the hell did you schedule this on the day of the LSU-Alabama game, you know? It's just inconsiderate. They put me in a back room with a TV. It was great. Nice win, if lucky. Anyway, that's enough. We were trounced, or Republicans were trounced. There's no getting around that simple fact. The Democratic candidate for president received 53% of the vote, the Republican 46%. That's a 7-point clobber. I call that a clobber. And did you know this? Those making over $200,000 a year, the hiring class in America, gave Barack Obama 6 more percentage points of their vote than they did John McCain. This was a change from 2004, when they gave George Bush 20% more than they gave John Kerry. The rich have fled, at least for the moment. That's last Tuesday. We'll see what happens to bring them back. Nevertheless, the question that remains open, and most relevant to us today and to the Heritage Foundation in general, is did conservatism get trounced? The Republicans did conservatism? Was last Tuesday's election a referendum on conservatism? Was conservatism on the plate? And whether it was or not, did liberalism get 2 thumbs up? Let's work backwards. When Barack Obama announced his candidacy, he emphasized one big thing, and he was known for one big thing. You remember what it was? Opposition to the war in Iraq. That's how he made his campaign. This, of course, was one of the big themes in the 2006 elections, where power shifted from Republicans to Democrats on the same basis. That was the issue. That was the issue everyone predicted would be the issue. The other issue was one Republicans gave them: corruption. Corruption of Republicans in Washington. Jack Abramoff, Mark Foley, Bob Ney, Duke Cunningham. Not content with these embarrassments, the following year we had Larry Craig, and then this year we have Ted Stevens. This is the party of traditional values and law and order. When it became clear that John McCain would be the nominee of the Republican Party, he was known for 2 big things at the time. He was the staunchest proponent of the war in Iraq. I would rather lose the election than the war, and he did. And he was the staunchest opponent of corruption within his own party. And then 2 things happened on the way to November. The war in Iraq became a non-issue because John McCain was right. We pacified much of Iraq and doused much of the fire we had been wringing our hands over in 2005 and 2006. What did it? Well, clearly the surge, the efforts of our men and women in uniform under the military leadership of General David Petraeus, and the political leadership principally of 3 men: George W. Bush, Joe Lieberman, and John McCain. Without them, no surge. Without them, no victory in Iraq. Without them, ironically, no taking the Iraq issue off the table in 2006. And off the table it went. You've heard the expression, no good act goes unpunished. This was disproportionate. There then became a general running around in search of a theme for the campaign. Barack Obama saw President Bush's low approval ratings and then found change, you're right, as his dominant theme, while John McCain saw Republican brand name disapproval and decided to go for something called reform. The problem is the Democrats are pretty good with the change theme. Republicans are really not so good with the message of reform, certainly not this time. We offered a weak medicine. They offered a strong one. They put change and transform. They put change and transform against reform, and as is usually the case, transform will win. Then came September, and the world itself was transformed and changed, September 15th. The responsibility for the economic collapse, as best I understand it, lies in a lot of precincts, many Democrat, some Republican. Read the story in the New York Times Sunday of Merrill Lynch, the narrative of Merrill Lynch. It will make you sick and angry. But since Ronald Wilson Reagan asked Jimmy Carter in 1980 whether we were better off or not, the rules, like it or not, fair or not, have been set. The people voting, the public that votes, blames the president for the failures that occur while he is in office. It's a fallacy. It's post hoc, ergo propter hoc, because it happened after, it happened because of. Nevertheless, it's something that is part of the American political canon now. Which brings us to last Tuesday. First, a few items of good news for conservatives and for all Americans, I think, all on the issue of race. A supposed truth maintained, it seems, almost forever by the old left and dismissed as untrue by conservatives for many years now was absolutely shattered on Tuesday, namely that a black man cannot or could not be elected president in the United States of America. With this shattered myth came others, namely that a black man or any other racial or other minority in this country cannot succeed as far as his or her dreams will take them in America. Does this mean racism is over in America? No, it does not. It doesn't mean that. But it does mean, or I hope it means, that much of the nonsense about America as a racist country is over. It should sure be over. I'll repeat to you what I said on CNN Tuesday night about 11 o'clock. I said, you know, it really is a heck of a country. Europeans don't understand us. They think we're a bunch of, Bible-thumping Baptists, and we'd never elect a black person. They just don't get America. They don't understand how it works. I said, but bear this in mind. In the year 2000, Barack Obama could not get on the floor of the Democrat convention. He was not able to rent a car because his credit wasn't good enough in the year 2000. Now he's the president-elect of the United States. The Bush years were good for some people, obviously. I hope he thanked him today. But this, I hope as well, former Secretary of Education and drug czar hat on, liberal Ta-Nehisi Coates, who writes for Time magazine, got it exactly right. He said this, think about this. The most famous black man in America isn't dribbling a ball or clutching a microphone. He has no prison record. He has not built a career on four-letter words. So much of our blues boils down to the news and CNN. You go home, you cut on the TV, and always you're reduced to skyrocketing murder rates in the black community, singers on trial for defiling children, and overvalued athletes making it rain. Close quote. End of a lot of that. Great. And if so, we can be very grateful for that. Juan Williams wrote this morning in the Washington Post, one other good thing, a really good thing. The Jesse Jacksons, the Al Sharptons, and the Reverend Jeremiah Wrights remain, but their influence and power have faded considerably. The market has irrevocably shrunk for Sharpton-style tirades against the man and the system. The emphasis on racial threats and extortion-like demands, all aimed at maximizing white guilt as leverage for getting government and corporate money, has lost its moment. How does anyone waste time on racial fantasies like reparations for slavery when there's a black man who earned his way, like it or not, into the White House? It's pretty good. Now some bad news for conservatives. First, we're told that the silver lining from last Tuesday is that we're still a center-right country. And the evidence cited so far, and this is an ongoing debate, I haven't made up my mind fully on this, is that the same percentage of voters who described themselves as conservative in 2004, 34%, described themselves that way last week. But did they vote? And who did they vote for? What in heck were those conservatives thinking? Do you know that self-identified conservatives, 20% of people who identified themselves as conservative, pulled the lever for Barack Obama? What were they thinking? They wanted higher taxes. They wanted to surrender in a war zone. They wanted radical abortion policies that include opposition to partial birth abortion and even abortion after the child is born alive. Associations with domestic terrorists. I think it's fair to say that more is known by more people about Bill Ayers this year than at any time in the last 30 years. More was known about Barack Obama's positions than could have been known about any candidate in the past, given the proliferation of the internet and talk radio. And still, 1 in 5 self-described conservatives voted for Barack Obama. Second, a majority of Americans now, according to polls, for the first time consistently favor government doing more for them, not less. The government should do more for its citizens, not less. Less self-reliance, more government involvement. 3, a majority of Americans still oppose the Iraq War, and I believe it is one of the most just causes and deployments of the U.S. military in modern times. The liberation of 50 million Muslims, Muslim women, and the bringing down of a tyranny. Fourth, the numbers are simply hard to argue with. Barack Obama received a higher percentage of the popular vote than Ronald Reagan did in 1980, than Bill Clinton did in 92 or 96, than Al Gore and Ralph Nader combined in 2000, or than George Bush in 2000, 2004. It's a big win. Solid, traditionally reliable Republican states, Indiana, North Carolina, Virginia, Colorado, Nevada, Ohio, all went for Obama, as did towns like Levittown, Pennsylvania, where a New York Times reporter wrote, on and on, military moms, Vietnam veterans, abortion opponents went for Obama. The myth about Hillary voters would not go for Obama, they went 80% for Barack Obama. And finally, number 6, the most left-wing, inexperienced candidate the Democrats have ever fielded beat a well-known center-right war hero, a man who suffered more for his country than any candidate of a major party ever in the history of the presidency, with an even more conservative running mate. and he beat him by 7 points. So what are we to make of this? We've got a lot of work to do. Despair? Certainly not. All is not bleak, especially about conservatism. And I truly question whether it was conservatism that was defeated last Tuesday. Here's why. The same year that Democrats took back the House in 2006, we as a movement defeated the Dubai Ports World effort to run security at our nation's water ports. In 2006 and 2007, we united and we were able to defeat comprehensive immigration reform, which would have given amnesty to millions of illegal immigrants and exploded our welfare system. After, I repeat, after we lost the House and Senate in 2006, we increased, not decreased, our troop level in Iraq and put in place a strategy that has calmed the country behind the wildest dreams of our side, as well as the Iraq study group, Lord knows, and the defeatists and naysayers both at home and abroad. Remember Harry Reid? He said we had already lost. All of this was accomplished by a conservative movement that at various times had to take on either its own party, even its own president, or its own party and its own president and the left at the same time. So there's health in conservatism. Despite reports to the contrary, Barack Obama did not inspire a sleeping giant of voters for his cause. This has been the biggest misreport since last Tuesday, record-breaking turnout. If you look at the numbers from the websites, and we've looked at all of them, you see about 122.8 million people voted for the major candidates last week. In 2004, the number was a bit over 121 million. As a report just out 2 days ago from American University States, turnout in Tuesday's election was the same in percentage terms as it was 4 years ago, or at most has risen by less than 1%. This was not a historic turnout. Both good and bad news for conservatism. Conservatism was really not on the ballot at the presidential level this year. That's the bad news. It should have been. Would have been nice to see what would have happened if it had been. The good news, perhaps, is that we were spared a defeat, although I'm not sure we would have been defeated if conservatism had really been seriously in play. Voters were simply not given what you could call a strong conservative choice. Aside from the war in Iraq, the supply-side message was shunned aside. We never heard about the supply side. We never heard about how markets work. It was shunned aside in favor of cutting earmarks, a tiny part of the budget, as all the experts at Heritage can tell you. That's most of what we heard from the Republican candidate. A worthy position, but not the heart of the matter. We didn't hear much about market-based health care reform, what I think was McCain's really great proposal. Thanks to Mike Frank, I even understand it. We didn't hear about that. We didn't hear about race preferences. We didn't hear about fundamental education reform. And abortion received not so much as a peep, even partial birth and the abortion of live children. As gratifying as it was to have a true conservative like Sarah Palin on the ticket, and may I say it was gratifying, her message, aside from support for our efforts in Iraq, was so controlled that her core principles were shunned aside in favor of talk, mostly about reform. Again, not a great conservative or Republican strong point. And the White House, as Mark Stein recently put it, with his typical insight and humor, it's hard for Republicans to hammer Obama as a socialist when their own party is nationalizing the banks and its presidential nominee is denouncing the private sector for putting profits before patriotism, close quote. Finally, the touchstone of our culture, marriage. It was saved in not just Arizona, but Florida, and of course, as you all know, California, where even the Republican governor was in favor of gay marriage. And as no one has made it more famous than Rush Limbaugh, my colleague, he and I share 15 million people on the radio. He's got 12. But as Rush pointed out, in an irony of this year's election, it was black citizens of California who defeated that proposition. Whites in California were in favor of the gay marriage amendment, barely, but it was black citizens of California who were strongly opposed to the gay marriage initiative. Racial preference, yes, that's right. And racial preferences were struck down in Nebraska. So given all the headwinds facing conservatives, and I really don't think it was a headwind, that was a title of an article, Headwinds McCain's Facing by Byron York in National Review. It was really, after September 15th, a hurricane, a Category 5 hurricane. With the above results and a presidential ticket that didn't offer up conservatism as an option, can we really say that conservatism was defeated? I don't think so, especially amidst an economic collapse where, as Scott Rasmussen pointed out today, Rasmussen's very reliable, very sensible pollster, the Democrat spoke more about tax cuts than the Republican. That should never happen. There were a lot of headwinds facing conservatives this year, including a media that was simply in the tank for Barack Obama, as ombudsmen from the leading newspapers now, after the election, seem to be tripping all over themselves to report. Read the Washington Post today, a little late, but they've told us about the bias of the Washington Post in the ombudsman's report. Thanks so much for the news. And while John McCain may have been the candidate most able to defeat a Democrat this year, he was known for three very big problems that conservatives have had with him over the past 8 years: opposing President Bush's tax cuts, McCain-Feingold, and comprehensive immigration reform. My point is this: conservatism was not defeated because conservatism wasn't offered. Where do we go from here? Well, one more piece of good news, very good news. The Heritage Foundation was not defeated, will never be, and is now needed more than ever. You were supposed to leap to your feet, wasn't that? Ed leaps to feet. Okay, all right. Seriously, another miscue. I have a serious point, and it's a plea. Do not give in. Do not give up. Do not look down at your shoes. As Darrell Royal, former football coach at Texas, said to his players, only time to look down at your shoes is if you've had an accident. Remember, it took a Jimmy Carter presidency to give us a Ronald Reagan presidency. It took a Bill Clinton presidency to yield a Republican revolution on the Hill. And there are a lot of great young current and future leaders in our movement. I'll be with them tomorrow down in Miami, Republican governors. I'm on a panel, think about this. I'm on a panel with Byron York, Bobby Jindal, Rick Perry, and Jeff, are you going to be there? Well, you should be. Anyway, that's good company. Irving Kristol once said that when there's a crisis, start a magazine. Well, there's a lot to do. Yeah, he's an intellectual. Well, there's a lot to do, and I don't think we need any more magazines. Start some websites. I work in the waters of the culture. Culture is what interests me. I've begun a site called Culture 11, easy to remember, because I don't think we've paid enough attention to our culture. I really think a lot of this has to do with how we raise our children, how we teach our children, what they learn, the fact that they learn more from television than the schools, and what they learn in the schools sometimes isn't worth it. What'd you say about Bill Amos? Three boys, one college degree. It is a great country if you don't let liberal professors get in the way of people's advancement. And that's proved over and over again. I am a philosopher, and the one thing I learned from my favorite philosopher, Plato, was this. He said there are really only two fundamental questions. Who gets to teach the children, and what do we teach them? If you talk to young people in this election year, you find out what they have been learning. And you see that for a lot of them, a lot of work has to be done. We have to engage in what Tom Wolfe calls the great relearning, the relearning of first things. George Orwell said, sometimes the first responsibility of intelligent men is a restatement of the obvious. And I'm afraid in our politics, we're going to have to restate the obvious. People may learn it another way, but it may be a harsh lesson indeed. Access to information now is more readily available than any other time in our history. It's interesting that while it's so accessible and so available, our young people aren't getting it. But let's keep at it. The ability to spread that information is there. Let us indeed stay at it. Finally, no whining. We don't allow two things in our house, never did. No one can whine, and no one can ever say they are bored. Not allowed. Let me tell you why we shouldn't whine. We have the future candidates. I've seen them. I can give you a list. We have the experts. Many of them are here tonight. We have the information. We have the vehicles. And yes, we still have, after a civil war, 2 world wars, terrorist attacks, and a Republican Party voted out of its nation's capital, we have still, and we are still, the last best hope of Earth. Let's act that way and know again, as Lincoln did, that right makes might and not the other way around. We are told by the Bible to appoint a watchman for ourselves. Men and women of the conservative movement, of heritage, you are the watchmen. Now let's get to it. Thank you very much. Now you stand. Thank you. Wonderful. Some question or two?
Basically, on message. I've got the question. Okay. Sure. Here.
Oh, is there one there? I got it. Yeah.
There you go. Okay.
I got it. I wanted wine, but he said there was water up here. That's fine. Go to it.
Okay, you just said you've got a list. First question, who are the rising conservative stars? Is Sarah among them? Where's your list?
Who are the rising conservative stars? Is Sarah among them? Sure she is. Of course she is. We were very upset about the handling of Sarah because I think she should have made her debut through talk radio, frankly, through friendly channels. If you saw her early on and then you saw her in the last couple of weeks, she just got better and better. This is a practice thing. You know, this national stage is a difficult stage, and it should have gone a better way. But she's getting a lot of it now, and talk about a baptism by fire. Yeah, I mean, look, here's the list. So I start with the Senate, Jeff Sessions, Tom Coburn, Jim DeMint, John Kyle. These are fabulous people. I mean, these are really terrific people. The governors, Sarah Palin, Bobby Jindal, Matt Blunt, Haley Barbour, Rick Perry, people in the House even, Paul Ryan, Eric Cantor. One thing about Mike Pence, one thing about the Obama ascendancy is that, it changes the rules a little bit, Do you have enough experience? Can you get there from here? He got there from here. And let's remember who he defeated along the way. I mean, this was quite an extraordinary achievement. One of the most powerful families, I use that in the true meaning of the term family, of the Democratic Party, the Clintons. So we have a lot of the horse. Did I forget anybody? Well, we have our guys this time who'll be back, Mike Huckabee and Mitt Romney. And is Newt going to get in? I don't know. He's as old as I am, isn't he?
That's young.
That's young, yeah. Anyway, we're loaded with talent and ideas.
Okay. What should be the proper role for conservatives during the Obama presidency?
Well, wait till he takes office before you start criticizing him as president. You can a decent interval, I think. He is the president-elect of all the people. He will be the president of the United States. At the inaugural, when you watch, I think you should tell your children or grandchildren that that's the president, and we're going to wait and see what he does. And then as he acts, we respond as free men and women. I have a hope, based more on hope, my button, I don't have one, than experience, that maybe some of the first fights won't be with us. My strongest reason for saying that is take a look at the Wall Street Journal last week, the committee chairman, the Democrat committee chairman. Good Lord. I mean, you can be liberal and still be deeply offended by the prospect of Henry Waxman, Barney Frank, John Conyers. It goes on. And they're going to push, and they're going to push hard. And if he pushes back against them, there may be time to time when I'm in his corner. But let's see. What I fear is that Joe Biden was right in his prediction that this young president will be tested. We were talking upstairs, maybe the Russians will be first. I love Ed's assessment of that, the generals who are here. I think the Russians will push very hard. And one thing that all these enemies of the United States agree on is that they're enemies of the United States. They may talk to each other. They may try to do several things at once. And then we shall see how how this young president does. There's been one thing that's been really forgotten in this country, which is that after 9/11, everyone predicted we would be hit again. We have not been hit again, and the President of the United States has protected us. And not only have we not been hit again, but since 2004, no major American interest has been hit in a serious way. Check the Federalist Papers. The job description. There's only one essential element in the job description. The safety of the people is the principal responsibility of the chief executive.
Two related questions. I'm a 22-year-old college student. By the way, did you notice a number of Young Presidents Club members here?
Yes.
Great.
Terrific.
Wonderful. At a major 22-year-old college student at a major university. I love America. How do I best counteract my burned-out hippie profs and their crazy ideas? And closely related, what advice would you give the next generation of conservatives?
Well, you should probably keep some of your opinions to yourself. That is not the way to win them over. The Irish definition of charm, the capacity to elicit the answer yes before the question is asked. That's sort of the opposite. But you should stand up. We graduated one from Princeton, and we got another one there, and he's in fights all the time. And at one point, one of his professors said, "You're not related to that Bennett." And he said, "Yes, that's my Uncle Bill. And my father is the best trial lawyer in Washington, so you better watch it." No, he didn't. He has stood up and taken his knocks and so on. Look, you got to view this tactically and strategically. If the people have integrity and they'll accept an argument and you can make an argument, do so. But your job is to learn as much as you can and graduate. You don't have to defeat all these people at the same time. Your job is to get through, learn as much as you can. But the main thing you should do in college is make sure you're reading the right stuff. If you're not reading the right stuff, write me. I got a list. All right?
You can start by, when you answer the next one, by telling us your definition of an Irish fight on the road.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. How does a changing demographic base affect the conservative movement?
I know there's been so much made out of this. Increasing number of population being black, Latino, human beings, and they want to improve their lives. They want to make money. They want to hold on to their money. They want to raise their families. Notice the cultural bend of this campaign as it got into the last 4 or 5 weeks. Notice the ads. Remember the Clinton ads about end welfare as we know it? See the Obama ads about Kansas values? My grandmother, my grandfather was with Patton's army. La Rochefoucauld says hypocrisy is the tribute that vice pays to virtue. And this tribute to the virtues suggests that in the thinking at the upper reaches of the Obama campaign, including Obama, they understand that culturally this is still a country where people value those things. Now, I think because we've had a campaign in which the press did not do its job of holding people accountable for what they were saying, we had a campaign in which, it happens in every campaign, people promise everything because there are no trade-offs in a campaign. There are only trade-offs in governing and in life. In real life, campaigns are not real life, and you can promise everything. So look, I think that we should be obviously aware of what we're talking about, but I've never thought in terms of color, in terms of the issues I have talked about. And I have, according to the demographics, we have a remarkably large minority audience on my radio show. A large number of black people listen, a large number of Latinos. We talk a lot about issues like education and drugs, and the condition of children and raising children, and I find parents of whatever color are pretty much equally interested in this. It doesn't hurt for the party to showcase some of its people who may not be, the standard typical WASP background, but I don't think that we should practice any kind of affirmative action. They are there, they are coming along, and that's a very, very good thing. After 2 years or 4 years of Obama, and the fascination, which is what it has been for some people, the fascination of something unusual, of making a statement, people will, I think, get back to reality. Remember that statistic about the black voter in California defeating that gay marriage initiative. It's a remarkable thing. You remember what happened in 2004, Ohio, and you remember there was something on the ballot in 2004, a similar thing. The black church is mobilized, and that probably put George Bush over the top. It's very interesting. The Irish fight, you want me to end with that? You got more?
I got, yeah, let me do
These raids, I should end soon.
You got to do retail politics here, Bennett.
I get a cup, don't I?
Okay, yeah, you do. Okay, give you a new necktie, too.
We go back a long way. Tell them about Korea. Tell them about it. Come on.
No, I will not.
He took me, no, you gonna do it?
Go ahead.
Took me to the 38th parallel, and they said, stand there and don't step over the line. And I was the kid who stepped on the seal at Gonzaga. I was the kid who took the communion wafer out of the thing. And I said, can I just put my foot over? He pulled my foot back. Anyway, where did we go to get our picture taken?
Yeah, one of the
Somewhere at tourist traps on the way up to the 38th. And we got our picture taken, and they sent it to us, great big thing. And we were like this. And underneath it said, we are happy together. And it's a long trip. We shared it with our wives. It was very...
And that was the night, as I recall,
oh, yeah.
when you made me break into my duty-free that I was bringing
Yes.
along, because that was the night that the Book of Virtues hit #1.
That's right. Book of Virtues hit #1.
Anyway. Okay, two about Bush 43. Had President Bush expressed his veto pen on spending bills, would the conservative movement be better off? And
Sure.
what should President George W. Bush to advance the conservative cause once he's out of office?
Oh, whatever he wants. I mean, he's worked long and hard, 8 years. Yeah, sure, he should have used the veto pen and done some other things. Too. I'm going to give him credit for fulfilling the major part of the job description, and recognize that this happens. This happens in American history. It happens happened to Churchill. Remember, we all know what happened to Churchill. These things happen, but there were a lot of things that went wrong in this administration. He needs to figure out what his path will be for a while. He needs to think about things and decide how and where he gets back in. But we've got a very strong bench. We've got terrific people, and I'm very confident about the future. Back to our message, back to our basics, and I mean, my guess is that this administration is going to give us lots of opportunities to bring forward our principles in opposition, where they will be clear as a bell. They just weren't. The case just wasn't made this time for the things that the people in this room, I believe.
As our key strategist, it will be a target-rich environment. Last one, kind of parochial interest to you, the fairness doctrine. Should we be worried, and what can we do?
Yeah, I guess so. It seems to be called on to be alarmist about this. I don't know how they enforce this daggone thing, but apparently they are going to try. Now, I would hope that somewhere there are some libertarian, liberal First Amendment lawyers who will see that this is just an outrage and that you can't do it. I will tell you, if they try to impose the fairness doctrine and tell us, that we have to balance all our views with somebody with different points of view, you will have one fight like you have never seen before. And I would... And talk about having an articulate group on our side. How would you like to argue against Limbaugh, Hannity, Ingram, and Levin all at the same time, And I'd be the corner guy for all four. I mean, that's a heck of a group. But I suppose, it has been the history of the left to try to oppose this kind of thing and to be totalitarian in its point of view. But, I kind of look forward to the fight, which is, you wanted me to end with that Irish thing, because someone said, how do you describe the way you've lived your life? And they thought I was going to talk about the virtues, which I wrote not out of excess but out of need, and aspiration more than had enough for me. I passed some on to other people. I said, it's the story of the Irishman who walks down the street, sees a fight going on, says, excuse me, is this a private fight or can anybody get in on it? And And I'm happy to be in the fights with you all next to me. Thanks very much. Thank you, Ed.